on my other channel, you can find a link in the description, I recently went back to an unintentionally abandoned series where I rewatch and react to the 1987 to 1996 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon series. It's been a mixed bag.
An off-brand Pee Wee Herman. That's what we're dealing with. An off-brand Pee Wee Herman. Jesus Christ. This is gonna suck. This is gonna suck!
But as a side effect of that, I've also gone back and watched the various TMNT movies, and I realized that I hadn't watched the third movie since it came out in theaters in 1993. So I watched it for the first time in nearly 30 years, and we really should have realized what was going to happen to the franchise at that point. As has been repeatedly chronicled by now, in 1984, comic artists Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, during a night of sketching and generally goofing around, wound up trying to top each other on a goofy sketch of a slightly anthropomorphic turtle with martial arts weapons, eventually describing it as a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. They then took the concept and developed it as an independent black and white comic that was deliberately parodying elements in mainstream superhero comics at the time, specifically Frank Miller's acclaimed run on Daredevil. The comic sold like gangbusters, allowing Eastman and Laird to continue the series. However, it was still a fairly dark, if silly, comic and didn't really do much outside of the nation comic fandom. Except the comic came to the attention of a savvy licensing agent who saw the potential and took it to Playmates Toys. Playmates liked the idea, but much like every other toy maker in the 80s, wanted a TV cartoon to go with it. Long story short, the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon series started with a 5-episode miniseries in 1987, and would proceed to run for 10 seasons until 1996 with a total of 193 episodes. The toys were insanely popular. Eastman and Laird's weird little goof exploded into a massive media empire that was the biggest pop culture thing in the world for a while. 1990 was unquestionably the peak of the original wave of Turtlemania. The cartoon had reached the standard 65-episode syndication mark and then made the extremely rare jump from syndicated weekday programming to the highly coveted Saturday morning network time slot for part of its 4th season, moving there exclusively from its 5th season onward. New toys seemed to be coming out every week, and naturally, the Turtles got their own live-action, theatrically released movie, which was so successful, it held the record for the most successful independent film ever made until the Blair Witch Project blew it out of the water. But the problem with reaching the top is, once you're there, there's nowhere to go but down. By 1993, the shine was starting to wear off. Kids who had been there when the cartoon started were either starting to or had already aged out of the franchise. Let me illustrate. I was 11 years old when I saw the first 5 episodes on its original airing. When the show ended in 1996, I had earned an associate's degree in college. In 1993, I was 17, and while I still like cartoons, I had left the Turtles behind on TV years previously, trading it in for stuff like Animaniacs and, of course, Batman the Animated Series. Kids' cartoons were starting to get a little more sophisticated in terms of storytelling and animation, making a lot of the shows with their roots in the 80s look old-fashioned at best and hopelessly irrelevant at worst. And the original formula of goofy comedy with a smattering of action that TMNT had been relying on wasn't holding attention anymore, and frankly, starting to show its age. The show would shift to a darker, edgier tone in its 8th season in order to try to retain viewers, but the Red Sky era wouldn't be enough to keep the show alive for longer than another 24 episodes, spread out over 3 seasons. A lot of people point to the truly awful live-action TV series Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation as the final death knell for the original wave of the Turtles' popularity, and that's a fair assessment. But I maintain that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 was the true harbinger of the end of the Turtles' popularity. You immediately know the movie is in trouble by the entire setup. April O'Neil brings the Turtles a bunch of stuff from the flea market, including an antique scepter for Splinter. It turns out said scepter is magical and has the ability to send people back in time. The catch is that the person who travels gets swapped out with someone of roughly the equivalent mass in that time. So April gets replaced by the son of a feudal Japan-era warlord, who naturally assumes April's a witch and has her locked up. So after talking to the son and getting some basic information out of him, the Turtles have to go back in time to find April and only have 2.5 days to do it, or they get stuck in that era for good. Okay, cool. We're trying something new, introducing a sufficiently weird situation for the Turtles to get involved in, and we're not rehashing the Shredder as the main bad guy. But then the entire plot gets bogged down with additional unnecessary plot complications. The switching people thing becomes nothing more than an unfunny B-plot where the turtles swap with a group of samurai warriors and Casey Jones returns only to play babysitter to them every so often, while the warlord's son pisses and moans about how he needs to get back to save his girlfriend, who is a villager leading a fight against the warlord. Speaking of which, the movie decides to throw in another villain for no good reason, an English arms dealer trying to sell the warlord on gunpowder weapons like cannons and rifles. This is how the movie gets around the language barrier, as apparently interactions between the warlord and the Englishmen have caused everyone in the region to learn English as a second language. What follows is a really confusing mess made up of Mikey and Raph becoming enamored with the simpler life in feudal Japan. Well, no, actually, it's more like Raph is enjoying the fact they don't have to hide who they are, while Mikey is just attracted to the son's girlfriend. Side note, have you noticed that in every live-action TMNT movie, even the reboots, Mikey is just aggressively horny? I know he's a teenager, but still, it's kinda weird. Meanwhile, April finds a guy in the dungeons who looks like Casey, because it's Elias Koteas playing a dual role for no readily evident reason, who works for the Englishman but double-crossed him, so she helps him escape anyway. The turtles rescue April, lose the scepter for a while, try to make another one, and ultimately put off going home once they have it back to help the villagers fight against the warlord and the Englishman. And the Casey look-alike double-crosses them for no good reason. And of course, they win, and the English guy falls off a cliff and just vanishes into a shittily composed effects shot. Then Mikey says he's gonna stay, which lasts literally all of 5 minutes before he comes back just before the credits roll.
Ugh. Where did they come up with this stuff?
So already, there's both too much and not enough going on in the story alone. Nobody's motivations are clear, the use of two villains means eventually the warlord just fades into the background, Raph and Mikey's subplots are underdeveloped as hell, and April is relegated to being a MacGuffin for the turtles to go back in time. There's no reason why the guy April encounters in the dungeon should even be a part of this, and smacks of Elias Koteas demanding a bigger role in the film, given that Casey does nothing. There's a few good scenes here and there, but the movie's plot is a complete mess. And you know what else is a mess? The Turtles and Splinter. The animatronics and suits for the first two movies were famously made by Jim Henson's Creature Shop, and while they aren't perfect by today's standards, you can clearly see they were shooting to make the Turtles and Splinter feel as real as possible, given the constraints of the time. Hell, if you watch the first and second movie back to back, you can see substantial improvements between the two. But in the third one, for reasons which probably had to do with the budget, the suits and animatronics were handed over to the All Effects Company, who are best known more for creating robotic characters such as Johnny Five from the Short Circuit movies. And you can see it. The Turtles themselves look awful. Let's be clear, as mentioned earlier, limitations of animatronics and puppet technology in the 90s meant they were never going to look 100% realistic, but the first two movies managed to help audiences suspend disbelief by, 1, having the Jim Henson Company involved, but also 2, shooting those films largely in low-light interiors and nighttime exteriors so you can't really see the seams in the illusion. Even in the rare scenes where the turtles are in daylight, they're usually shot at sunset or otherwise shot in such a way as to diminish the flaws. Turtles 3, however, doesn't even bother with that. The majority of the movie takes place in broad daylight, and the turtles' faces just look blatantly artificial. Their eyes are almost always open, and they rarely blink, staring wide-eyed at everything. The mouths are these huge gaping maws with overly prominent teeth that don't move anywhere as nearly as smoothly as the Henson designs, and just flap open and closed in some scenes. Hell, they spend most of the movie in samurai armor so they don't have to bother with the full-body turtle suits. Splinter fares even worse. The animatronic is stiff and practically immobile. He's never shown from the waist down, and he just sits there in most of his scenes. Now granted, he kind of had that problem in the first movie as well, but things improved drastically in the second. So not only is this a downgrade, it's a downgrade even past the limitations of the first movie. The acting is no great shakes either. While Paige Turco, Elias Koteas, and Sab Shimono are clearly trying to work with what they have, the rest of the cast seems to just be going through the motions, figuring, like it seems everybody else who worked on this film did, that this was just a stupid kids movie and who really needs to put in any real effort. And the turtles themselves are annoying. Alleged jokes are just pop culture references that make no damn sense in the context of the setting.
Hey, you were expecting maybe the Addams Family?
And the boys seem really damn stupid compared to the previous films. Leonardo and Michelangelo suffer the most here, with Leonardo literally asking questions that a character answered seconds earlier.
Kind of a weird antique or something. I think it's Japanese.
Hey, what's that, April?
While I'm ranting, can I just say rewatching these movies, Corey Feldman was a terrible choice for the voice of Donatello. Donnie's supposed to be the smart one, but it hardly comes up in the first movie, and here I just do not buy any of the nerd babble Feldman utters in certain scenes.
Let's see here. If I subtract the cosine from the inverted integer, then I can take the flangular and put that here.
If you're curious, Feldman couldn't provide Don's voice in the second movie because he was pleading guilty to a drug possession charge at the time. The voice in TMNT 2 isn't the best, but it's a damn sight better than Feldman's performance in either of the other two movies.
Well, you know, in this market, it's actually very difficult to find good subterranean housing.
Since its release, TMNT 3 has been roundly and deservedly blasted by fans for being the worst of the 90s movies. While Kevin Eastman said in an interview that he thinks 2 was the worst, this one falls far short of anything entertaining for anyone except maybe the youngest of Turtles fans. I honestly feel sorry for any parents who were forced to take their kids to see this thing, and I'm glad that by the time this movie came out, I was old enough to go by myself and spare my own parents the agony of seeing this turkey. Now, the movie did make money, earning $54 million against a $21 million budget, and production was started on a fourth movie seemingly titled The Next Mutation, but it never got much farther than the script phase. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 was the first real sign that the Turtles had probably run their course and the glory days were over. 3 short years later, the cartoon series ended, and a year after that, the Next Mutation TV series came along to put the final nail in the coffin for that era of the franchise. However, the concept has always been just weird enough to attract kids of any age. And while the franchise has gone dormant from time to time, it's kept on coming back and pretty much has been a success each time. A new animated series closer in tone to the original Mirage comics began airing in 2003 and lasted for 7 seasons and 155 episodes. In 2009, Nickelodeon paid Peter Laird $60 million for the whole damn thing, although Laird still owns the right to publish 18 TMNT comics a year of his own. Eastman had sold his share of the franchise to Laird in the early 2000s. Nickelodeon promptly put another show into production, a CGI creation that lasted 5 seasons and 124 episodes. After the conclusion of the 2012 series in 2017, 8 months later a whole new series began serving as a franchise reboot. Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles only lasted 2 seasons, but it's developed a devoted fan base, and will be getting a movie on Netflix this summer to cap things off. Oh yeah, and Michael Bay produced 2 more live-action movies with disturbing Uncanny Valley mocap versions of the Turtles in 2014 and 2016. You know, honestly, they're okay, but not great movies by any stretch of the imagination. And through all of this, the Turtles continued to thrive in comics, from the original Mirage comics, to an all-ages comic published by Archie, to a brief time with Dreamwave, to the current series being produced by IDW. TMNT has, amazingly, continued to hang on in one form or another for almost 40 years now. The concept and its unique mix of sci-fi, fantasy, comedy, action, and its hey, let's just throw all this stuff into a blender and see what happens method of storytelling is uniquely positioned for continual refreshing. And while movies like TMNT 3 may knock our pizza-loving heroes down, like any good ninja, they'll always get up and keep on coming back for more.
Elvis Presley in Blue Hawaii.
Oh, you're
Welcome back to the International Turtle Games. Today's winners are, in the hammer throw, track and field Leo. Whoa! Next, it's Hot Dog and Mike tearing up the slopes. At the pool, Super Swimming Ralph is making everybody else look all wet. And Powerlifting Don is making those weights fly. Look out! Hope the Turtle Games were as much fun for you as they were for me.